Lieutenant Commander Mason Reyes stepped off the shuttle with calm steps, even though his heart beat faster than usual. He had been to many strange places in the galaxy, but nothing felt as intense as this moment. Today, for the first time in history, a human was invited inside the royal palace of Velthar Prime, the capital world of the powerful Zaltari Empire. The air on Velthar Prime was lighter than Earth's, with a strange sweetness like flowers and metal mixed together. The palace itself looked like it was made from glass and crystal. Tall towers sparkled in the sky, and glowing lines pulsed softly along the walls and floors. The palace guards, tall, blue-skinned aliens with black eyes and golden armor, stood silent and still as Mason walked past them. He kept his posture straight, hands by his sides, showing no fear. He had been trained for moments like this. His uniform was clean and perfect. No weapons, no gear. Only a small translation device clipped to his collar and a silver badge showing the symbol of Earth's unified government. Inside the palace, the hallways were wide and quiet. The floors reflected his steps like a mirror. Alien servants bowed their heads as he passed. Some of them looked curious. Others looked worried. One older noble whispered something to another and looked away quickly when Mason glanced in their direction. He wasn't surprised. To many of the Zaltari, humans were still new, strange, and dangerous. Earth had fought back against the Kalari Dominion, a race even the Zaltari had feared. And humans had survived. Some said humans were lucky. Others said they were unpredictable. Either way, they had earned a seat at the intergalactic table, and now Mason Reyes was the first human invited to stand before the Zaltari Queen. 2 guards opened a tall door made of green crystal, and Mason stepped into the throne room. It was massive. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into a soft blue light. Hundreds of nobles, soldiers, and advisors stood on either side of a long carpet that led to the Queen's throne. She sat there, taller than he expected, her long silver robes flowing like liquid light. Her eyes were like polished stones, calm but powerful. Her crown floated slightly above her head, spinning slowly. Beside her stood a smaller figure, a young girl with soft purple skin and wide golden eyes. She wore a tiny crown and a thin robe. The princess. Mason walked forward slowly, just as instructed. No sudden moves. No eye contact with the royal child. Bow at the correct distance. Speak only when spoken to. He stopped near the end of the carpet and bowed. Silence filled the entire room. He could feel hundreds of eyes watching him, waiting, judging. And then it happened. A small sound broke the silence. Quick footsteps on the smooth floor. Everyone turned in shock. The royal child, the princess, had broken away from her mother's side. She was running. Not just running. She was running toward the human. Before anyone could move, before any guard could react, she ran straight up to Mason and threw her arms around him. Gasps filled the room. Weapons clicked as guards raised their staffs and rifles. Nobles stepped back in horror. Even the queen stood from her throne, her mouth slightly open. But Mason didn't move. He stood completely still, the child's small arms wrapped tightly around his waist. She looked up at him with a big smile and said in clear galactic common, "Protect her." Mason blinked. His mind raced. He looked down slowly, careful not to make a wrong move. Her face. He knew that face. But from where? A flood of memories hit him all at once. A mission 3 years ago. A crashed ship on a wild jungle moon. A scared little girl hiding from jungle beasts. He had saved her. He had stayed with her until her people came. He had given her his insignia badge to keep her calm. She had cried when he left, but he had never known her name. He never knew she was royalty, and now here she was hugging him in front of the entire Zaltari Empire. The queen finally spoke, her voice low and sharp. "How does my daughter know you, human?" Mason looked up at her slowly. The room was frozen in silence, but his voice was steady. "I didn't know she was a princess," he said simply. "I just knew she was scared." Silence returned. No one moved. The queen stared at him for several long seconds, then she said, "The human will remain under protection. Until I decide what to do." The guard stepped forward. Mason didn't resist. As they led him away, the child clung to his side, refusing to let go. And everyone in the palace watched in stunned silence, not knowing what this moment would mean for their empire, for Earth, or for the galaxy. Two guards walked beside Mason Reyes, one on each side as they led him through the Crystal Palace. Their golden armor glowed in the soft blue light of the halls and their faces showed no emotion. Behind them, the royal child, Princess Kalia, followed with small but quick steps, refusing to be left behind. Mason stayed calm. He had trained for many dangerous situations, but this one was unlike anything he had faced before. A child of an alien queen, a future ruler of a powerful empire, had just called him protector in front of her people. Now he was being taken to an unknown place, surrounded by soldiers inside a palace where humans were not trusted. Still, he showed no fear. He kept his hands by his sides and his mind clear. He knew one wrong move could lead to disaster, not just for him but for Earth. After walking through several long hallways, they reached a quiet part of the palace. The guard stopped in front of a tall silver door. One of them pressed a panel on the wall and the door slid open. Mason stepped inside. The room was large but empty, except for a soft bed, a table, and a wide window showing the stars outside. A gentle light glowed from the ceiling. The door closed behind him with a quiet hiss. It was not a prison, but it was clear he was not free to leave. Mason walked to the window and looked out. The stars seemed to shimmer in strange colors here, as if space itself was different. He placed his hand on the cool glass. Then he sat down at the table, thinking. Only a few hours ago he had arrived as a guest. Now he was being watched like a threat. But what confused him the most was the child. The way she ran to him, how she remembered him, and what it meant. The door opened again. Two guards entered, followed by an older Zaltari male. His skin was darker blue and he wore long robes with medals on his chest. His eyes were sharp and his voice was calm but firm. "I am Vakar, advisor to the Queen," he said. "You may speak freely here, but choose your words with care." Mason nodded. "Understood." Vakar studied him for a moment. "You claim not to know who the child was, and yet she calls you protector." "I didn't know she was royalty," Mason replied. "I met her by chance years ago. I was injured. My ship crashed on a jungle moon. I found her alone and scared. I helped her survive. That's all. Why didn't you report it?" Vakar asked. "I thought she was just a lost child. I didn't know where she came from. We were rescued separately. I never saw her again until today." Vakar looked at him with narrowed eyes. "She wears the badge you gave her. Do you understand what that means to our people?" Mason shook his head slowly. "No, but I meant it as a promise. A promise that I would protect her." There was a long silence. Then Vakar turned and left without another word. The guards followed him and the door closed again. Mason sat in the quiet room, thinking about what would happen next. Hours passed. Then the door opened again. This time, it was Kalia. The princess walked in quickly, followed by a single guard who stayed near the door. She smiled and sat across from Mason at the table. "You remember me?" she said. "I do now," Mason replied. "You've grown." "You haven't changed much," she said with a giggle. "But you still look tired." Mason smiled for the first time that day. "You always noticed everything." Kalia looked at him seriously. "Mother is angry. She doesn't trust humans, but I told her you're different." "That may not be enough," Mason said gently. "Your people are afraid of mine." She leaned forward. "But I'm not. I want you to stay." "I want to help," he said, choosing his words carefully. "But I also need to know why this is happening now." Kalia looked down at the table. "Because there are people in the court who want war. They think Earth is dangerous. They think I should not speak to you." "Then why did you come to me?" Mason asked. "Because you saved me once," she said. "And I believe you'll do it again." Mason looked into her young, confident eyes and nodded. "I'll do my best." Just then, the lights flickered slightly. The guard near the door touched his communicator and spoke quickly in his language. Something had changed. The guard stepped forward. "You must stay here. Do not leave this room." "What's happening?" Mason asked. The guard did not answer. He guided Kalia out of the room and closed the door behind her. Mason stood up, listening carefully. The air in the palace had changed. Something was wrong. He looked out the window again, but this time he didn't see stars. He saw smoke. Mason Reyes didn't move for a full minute. He stood near the window, watching the thin trail of smoke rise in the distance. Something was happening inside the palace, but no alarm was sounding. The lights had returned to normal and everything looked quiet, but his instincts told him otherwise. The door to his room was locked. He had checked. No one was answering his calls either. He tried the panel near the bed, hoping to open a communication line to someone, anyone, but it didn't work. The system had been disabled. He was alone. He took a slow breath and sat back at the table, trying to stay calm. If something was wrong, he needed information. But he had no tools, no way to reach his team back on Earth, and no way to protect himself. And yet, he wasn't worried for himself. He was worried about Kalia, the way the guard had rushed her out. The flicker of the lights, the smoke outside the window. None of it felt normal. Something was wrong inside this palace, and if Kalia was in danger, he couldn't sit here doing nothing. He stood and walked around the room again. The walls looked smooth, but he tapped carefully along each panel, listening for hollow spots. When he reached the corner near the bed, he heard something unusual, a soft click. He pressed harder. A hidden compartment slid open. Inside was a small control pad glowing dimly. Mason looked at it with surprise, then smiled slightly. Whoever had designed this room had left a backup system. Maybe for emergencies. Maybe for people like him. He didn't hesitate. He sat down and began working. The pad was in the Zaltari language, but he had studied enough of it during his training. The system was old, older than most of the palace's modern tech. That worked in his favor. After a few minutes of careful typing, he opened a local map of the palace and accessed a security feed. He found Kalia first. She was in a small room with 3 guards. She looked safe, but she was speaking fast and the guards didn't seem calm. Then he switched feeds and found something else. A large group of armed nobles was moving through the lower levels. They weren't wearing standard royal guard uniforms. Their faces were covered. One of them was placing a device on the wall, a bomb. Mason's eyes narrowed. This wasn't just political unrest, it was a planned attack. He returned to the map and found an older maintenance tunnel behind the wall of his room. It had been sealed, but the pad gave him access. He opened the panel, pulled the emergency lever, and a section of the wall slid aside, revealing a dark, narrow path. He grabbed a metal pipe from the base of the bed, his only weapon, and stepped into the tunnel. The air was cold and smelled of dust. He moved quietly, following the map on the small pad. After 10 minutes of crawling through the narrow space, he reached another panel. He pushed it open and stepped out into a quiet hallway. He checked the map again and made his way toward the room where Kalia was held. As he turned a corner, he heard footsteps ahead. 2 masked figures carrying energy rifles were heading straight toward him. They hadn't seen him yet. He moved quickly. With no time to think, he rushed forward and swung the pipe. The first attacker dropped instantly. The second fired, but Mason dodged, grabbed the rifle and slammed the pipe into the attacker's arm. The weapon fell to the floor. Mason picked it up. It was heavy but familiar. He checked the settings, then continued forward, now armed. He reached the door to Kalia's room. The guards inside were alive, but the door was being forced open from the outside. Sparks flew as someone tried to cut through the lock. Without waiting, Mason took aim and fired once into the air. The attackers outside froze. The guards inside opened the door, shocked to see Mason standing there with a weapon in hand. "Get her out," Mason said, stepping inside. "There's a coup happening." "She's the target." The guards hesitated. "You are under custody." "Not anymore," Mason said. "You can either help me or get out of the way. But I'm not letting anything happen to her." Kalia stood behind the guards, eyes wide. "I knew you'd come." Mason gave her a quick nod. "We don't have time. Is there a safe room nearby?" One of the guards finally spoke. "There's an old chamber under the throne room. Only the royal family can enter." "Take us there," Mason said. Together, they moved quickly through hidden halls, avoiding the chaos now spreading through the palace. As they passed a broken screen, Mason saw a message in Zaltari. "Earth cannot be trusted. Remove the queen. Take the child." This was more than a power struggle. This was an attempt to break peace between Earth and the Empire. And Mason knew, if they failed to protect Kalia now, war would be the only future left. The old chamber beneath the throne room had not been used in many years. Dust covered the floor and the air was thick and still. Stone walls surrounded them, stronger than any metal, built long ago during a time of war. It was a royal bunker, meant to protect the ruling family if the palace ever fell under attack. Mason Reyes stepped inside first, his weapon raised. The room was empty. Safe for now. Behind him, Kalia followed, holding the hand of one of the guards. Her face was calm, but her eyes showed fear. She looked around the dark space, then turned to Mason. "Is this where we hide?" she asked softly. Mason looked at her and nodded. "Only for a little while. We'll keep you safe until this is over." The two guards closed the thick door behind them. A low hum filled the room as the ancient locks activated. No one could get in now. Not without a royal command code or heavy explosives. One of the guards, a tall female with a scar across her cheek, walked over to Mason. "You should not be here," she said. "You are not one of us." Mason didn't react. He kept his voice calm. "I'm not here for your trust. I'm here for her." The guard looked at Kalia, who stood quietly beside the wall. Then she nodded once. "Then protect her. Because if she falls, everything falls." The lights in the chamber flickered for a moment. Then the walls shook slightly. A deep rumble came from above. "They've started bombing the palace," the second guard said. "They want to destroy the throne room. They're trying to make the queen surrender." Kalia stepped forward. "What about my mother?" "She's still in the main chamber," the female guard replied. "But the rebels are getting close." Mason turned to the wall and pulled up the small control pad he had taken from his room. It was still connected to the old systems. He tapped into the palace network again, though the signal was weak down here. After a few moments, he found a live feed from the throne room. The queen was still there, standing tall, her advisors around her. Outside the main doors, rebels were trying to break through. Explosions flashed and smoke filled the halls. "She won't leave," Mason said. "She's staying to defend the throne." Kalia's eyes filled with tears. "They'll kill her." Mason looked at her, then at the guards. "There's a back tunnel. It leads to the throne room. I saw it on the map earlier." "That tunnel was sealed years ago," one guard said. "Then we unseal it," Mason replied. "We get her out. We bring her here." The guards hesitated. "That would risk the princess." "I'll go alone," Mason said. "I've done it before." Kalia stepped forward. "No, I'm coming with you." Mason shook his head. "It's too dangerous." "She won't leave if I'm not there," Kalia said. "My mother will fight to the death unless she sees me." Mason looked at her, surprised at the strength in her voice. She was still just a child, but there was something more in her eyes now. Something like courage. He turned to the guards. "One of you stays with her. The other comes with me." The female guard stepped forward. "I'll go." They moved fast. Mason found the sealed tunnel entrance behind a panel in the floor. The old lock was broken, but the guard used her handprint to open it. A wave of cold air rushed out. The tunnel was narrow and steep. Lights flickered along the walls. It smelled like rust and stone. They moved quickly, weapons ready, feet silent. Halfway through, Mason heard movement ahead. "Rebels." He signaled to the guard and moved to the side. Two masked attackers were placing charges near the end of the tunnel. If they succeeded, the whole path would collapse. Mason didn't wait. He lunged forward, tackling the first rebel. They struggled, rolling across the ground. The second turned and fired, but the guard struck him from behind, knocking him out cold. Mason punched the first rebel once, then twice, until he stopped moving. He grabbed the explosives and threw them into a deep pit nearby. "We keep going," Mason said. They reached the end of the tunnel minutes later. A hidden door opened into the back of the throne room. Smoke was everywhere. The queen stood tall, holding a ceremonial staff. Her advisors were injured, one already on the ground. The main doors shook with each explosion. She turned as the secret door opened. Her eyes widened as she saw Mason, and behind him her daughter. "Kalia?" she whispered. Mason stepped aside. The child ran into her mother's arms. The queen held her tightly, tears in her eyes. "You should not be here." "She came to bring you back," Mason said. "We need to leave now." Another explosion shook the throne room. Part of the ceiling collapsed. The queen looked around, then gave a single nod. "For my daughter," she said. "Let's go." They ran into the tunnel together, just as the doors behind them shattered, and far above, across the stars, the future of two worlds waited in silence. The secret tunnel shook again as the group rushed through it. Stones fell from the ceiling and dust filled the air. Mason stayed close to Kalia and her mother, watching every step. Behind them, the female guard kept her weapon ready, eyes on the tunnel's dark corners. The queen was strong, but Mason could see she was tired. Her royal robe was torn and her arm was bleeding. Still, she didn't ask for help. She walked with pride, holding her daughter's hand tightly. Kalia didn't cry. She didn't panic. She looked up at her mother with silent strength. She was no longer just a child. Mason could see it clearly now. She was learning how to lead. "We're almost there," Mason said, checking the path on his wrist device. The old chamber where they had hidden before was only a few turns away, but then the tunnel ahead of them echoed with footsteps. Fast, heavy, getting closer. Mason raised his hand. "Stop." Everyone froze. From the shadows ahead, 4 masked rebels appeared. They carried rifles and didn't hesitate to raise them. The leader of the group pointed straight at the queen. "Leave the child and the queen, the human can go." Mason stepped forward slowly. "I'm not leaving anyone." "You don't understand what you're protecting," the rebel leader said. "She plans to surrender your planet to our enemies." The queen raised her chin. "I have never betrayed peace. It is you who have betrayed your people. There is no peace with humans," the rebel shouted. "They are a threat to all." Kalia stepped forward before Mason could stop her. Her voice was loud and clear. "He saved my life twice, and he never asked for anything." The rebels hesitated. Even their weapons lowered slightly. "I'm the heir to the throne," she continued. "I will remember who stood with us today and who didn't." The queen looked at her daughter, surprised but proud. Mason saw the rebels exchange quick glances. Some looked unsure. The leader, however, was firm. "Step aside," he said, "or die with them." Mason had heard enough. He moved like lightning, pulling his weapon up and firing at the ceiling above the rebels. The old stone cracked and fell, blocking the path between them. Dust and rocks crashed down, separating the rebels from their target. "Run!" Mason shouted. The group turned and ran through the tunnel, coughing and stumbling as the air filled with smoke and dust. Mason stayed at the back, watching for any sign of pursuit. They reached the old chamber minutes later. The guard outside opened the door quickly and the group rushed in. The door closed behind them with a loud thud. Inside, the second guard stood ready, weapon in hand. He looked surprised to see the queen. "We got her out," Mason said, breathing hard. The queen walked to the center of the room and finally sat down. She looked at her bleeding arm and winced. Kalia rushed to her side. "Let me help." "It's only a scratch," the queen said softly. "You were brave, little one. Too brave." Mason handed a small med kit to the guard, who began treating the queen's wound. For a few minutes, silence filled the room. The rumbling above had grown weaker. The worst of the attack seemed to have passed. Then the queen spoke. "This rebellion is more than a political act. They want to end the treaty with Earth. They believe war is the only path forward." Mason nodded. "I saw messages on the palace system. Some of your nobles want to remove you and blame Earth. They fear change," she said. "They fear that Kalia will one day rule beside humans." The words hit Mason like a wave. "Beside?" he asked quietly. The queen looked at him. "Kalia chose you. That means something among our kind. You protected her without knowing who she was. Now she sees you as more than a savior." Kalia looked down, shy for the first time, but she didn't deny it. Mason took a slow breath. "I didn't come here for politics. Or for power. I just couldn't leave her." "That is why you may be the only one who can stop what's coming," the queen said. "The galaxy is watching. If the story of today spreads, it could bring hope or fuel the flames of war." Outside the chamber, footsteps returned. This time it was not rebels. A squad of royal guards entered. Their armor scratched but intact. "The rebellion is retreating," their leader said. "We've taken back the palace." Everyone breathed easier. But Mason knew it wasn't over. Not yet. The real war was still waiting. In hearts, in minds, and across the stars. And the story of the human who protected an alien princess was just beginning. For the first time in hours, the palace was quiet. Smoke still drifted through the broken halls. Burned banners and shattered glass lay on the floor like painful memories. But the gunfire had stopped. The rebels had disappeared into the shadows they came from. Mason stood in the queen's private chamber now, watching from a balcony as workers began repairs. Royal guards stood at every entrance. No one was taking chances anymore. Behind him, Kalia sat with her mother. She was holding a small silver pendant, one Mason hadn't seen before. "It belonged to my father," Kalia said, looking up at him. Mason turned. I didn't know he had passed. The Queen nodded slowly.
He died 2 years ago.
Assassinated by one of the same noble families who led today's attack. They feared his peace treaty with Earth. Mason felt a cold anger rise in his chest. They killed him. To stop peace. They feared unity, the Queen said. Because unity means change. And change means they lose power. Kalia looked at Mason again. He believed in humans. Just like I do. Mason walked over and sat beside them. So what happens now? The Queen leaned back in her chair. Now we rebuild, but not just walls. We must rebuild trust both among our own people and with Earth. But the rebels? Mason asked. Won't they try again? They will, the Queen said. But next time we'll be ready. And next time, they'll know that humans don't run away. There was silence for a moment. Then a voice came from the door. The council has arrived. Mason stood as a group of Zaltari nobles entered the room. Some were bruised. Some still wore bandages. Others looked angry, but not at Mason. They bowed to the Queen and spoke in soft, respectful tones. We lost many good people today, one of the older nobles said. But you survived, and the princess lives. That gives us hope. Another noble stepped forward. We know now that the rebellion came from within our own families. We are ready to stand with you and with your future vision. The Queen nodded. Then we begin again, and we make one thing clear. Earth is not our enemy. Many in the group nodded. A few still looked uncertain, but they did not speak. One noble, younger than the rest, looked at Mason. You protected the royal line, she said. Why? Mason thought for a moment, then answered honestly. Because when a child ran to me for help, I didn't see a species. I saw someone who needed me. There was a pause. Then the noble smiled just slightly. That is what our people need to hear, she said. Not speeches, not war. Just truth. The Queen rose from her chair. Her presence filled the room with calm strength. Let this day be remembered, she said. Not as the day we nearly fell, but the day we rose together. The nobles bowed again and left the room quietly. Only Mason, Kalia, and the Queen remained. The Queen turned to Mason. You've become more than a guest. Mason Reyes. You've become part of our history. Mason scratched the back of his neck. Honestly, I didn't expect any of this. I came here as a cultural advisor. Kalia giggled softly. And now you're a hero. He smiled at her. Maybe. Or maybe just someone who couldn't walk away. The Queen studied him for a long moment. There is a summit tomorrow. Leaders from both Earth and Zaltar will attend. I want you there. Mason raised an eyebrow. Me, why? Because stories matter, she said. And your story may stop the next war before it begins. That night, Mason stood alone on the palace roof, looking up at the stars. The sky looked the same as always, quiet, beautiful, endless. But everything had changed. He thought about Earth, about how people there feared aliens the same way some Zaltari feared humans. Fear was easy, but maybe trust was worth the fight. Footsteps approached. Kalia joined him, her cloak wrapped tightly around her small shoulders. Do you miss your home? She asked. Sometimes, Mason replied. But I think, maybe I've found something here too. Kalia smiled. Then don't leave yet. We need you. He looked down at her, surprised by how grown up she sounded. You're going to be a great queen someday, he said. Kalia looked up at the stars. Not alone. Not without people who believe in peace, he nodded. Then we believe together. The wind blew gently through the quiet night, and somewhere deep in the stars, a new future was waiting. The next morning, the palace was alive with movement. Workers repaired shattered walls, cleaned debris, and tended to the wounded. The sun rose over the crystal towers of Velthar Prime, painting the city in gold and violet. Despite the destruction of the previous day, the palace seemed more alive than ever. Mason Reyes walked through the corridors, Kalia by his side. She held his hand, guiding him past groups of servants and guards who gave him respectful nods. News of his actions had already spread through the palace, and whispers of admiration followed him wherever he went. The Queen waited in the council chamber. She was composed, regal, but the fatigue in her eyes revealed the long night she had endured. Mason bowed as he entered. Kalia remained beside him. You've done more than I expected, the Queen said quietly. You saved my daughter, my people, and perhaps even the future of peace between our worlds. Mason shook his head. I didn't do it for glory. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Kalia smiled at him. And that is why everyone trusts you. The chamber doors opened and Earth's envoy stepped inside. A human diplomat, stern and precise, had arrived at last. Mason turned to face her. You are staying? The envoy asked, her eyes scanning the palace and then landing on Mason. I've been asked to help build trust, Mason said. I can't leave, not yet, the envoy frowned. You were supposed to return home after the summit. This could be considered irregular. The Queen's voice cut through the tension. Irregular, perhaps, but it is necessary. This human has proven himself loyal to the crown and to the future of my people. He will stay as an advisor and protector. That is my decision. The diplomat studied Mason closely. She saw no weapons, no lies, only calm resolve. Finally, she nodded. Very well. But understand that Earth is watching, and they will expect reports, Mason nodded. Then I will make sure our story is one of peace, not war. The Queen turned to Kalia. You were brave yesterday, my daughter. You showed wisdom beyond your years. But there is still much to learn. Kalia looked at Mason, then back at her mother. I learned from him. He showed me that courage is not just about strength. It's about protecting what you love, even when it is dangerous. The Queen smiled faintly. Then he shall be your guide. Outside the chamber, the palace had begun to recover. Mason walked through the halls, observing soldiers training together again, and nobles speaking quietly about reforms. He saw hope in their faces. For the first time, he realized that humanity's unpredictability, its courage, ingenuity, and compassion, had changed the Zaltari perspective. Humans were not monsters. They were capable of honor. Kalia tugged at his hand. Come, I want to show you something. She led him to a small balcony overlooking the central plaza. There, a group of children, Zaltari and human observers together, were planting new trees. Their laughter echoed bright and clear, cutting through the memory of yesterday's fear and chaos. This is good, Mason said softly. This is what we fight for. Kalia smiled. It can be more than peace treaties on paper. It can be life. Growth. Together. Mason nodded, feeling a warmth he had not expected in the palace of the most feared empire in the galaxy. And it starts here, he said, glancing back at her. Later, in the council chamber, the Queen formally appointed Mason as the official protector of the heir and advisor to the crown. The ceremony was simple, but powerful. Nobles, soldiers, and attendants witnessed it, their expressions ranging from awe to reluctant respect. You are now a part of this world, the Queen said, not as a guest, not as a stranger, but as a bridge between two peoples. Mason bowed humbly. I will do my best. For Kalia, for your empire, for peace. Kalia ran to him afterward, hugging him tightly. I knew you wouldn't leave. He smiled, ruffling her hair gently. And I won't. Not while you need me. The sun dipped lower in the sky, painting Velthar Prime in gold and purple again. Mason stood with Kalia and the Queen on the balcony, looking at the horizon. For the first time, he felt a sense of belonging beyond Earth. The Queen's voice broke the silence. You have shown my people what humanity can be. Sometimes unpredictable, yes, but also brave, clever, and compassionate. Perhaps now the galaxy will see it too. Mason nodded. They already have a reason to hope. Kalia smiled at both of them. And together, we'll make sure that hope grows. For Mason, the journey had begun as a mission, an uncertain assignment. Now it had become something far greater. He had bridged worlds, saved a child, and perhaps changed the course of history. And somewhere deep in the stars, where both humans and Zaltari watched, the galaxy began to believe that peace was possible, and that humanity, in all its courage and unpredictability, could be a force for good. The wind brushed past them gently, carrying the promise of new beginnings. Mason looked at the palace, at the people below, and finally felt it, the feeling of being part of something larger than himself, a story bigger than any one world. He had arrived as a visitor. He would remain as a protector, a friend and a symbol that courage, honor, and compassion could change the stars. And in that quiet moment, Mason knew that whatever the future held, humanity had earned its place among them. The stars shone brightly over Velthar Prime, as if in agreement, and the new era began.